Welcome to the channel. This video tells the story of a plane that disappeared. Even the ocean couldn't solve this mystery. The sky has always been a symbol of freedom. People dreamed of rising above the clouds, of going where there are no borders, where there is eternal day and peace. But in every dream, like the glint of the sun on an airplane's wing, there is a shadow. The shadow of fear. Fear of heights, of what is hidden thousands of meters beneath you, and of the thought, what if today is precisely your day? The March night of 2014 began like thousands of others. On the runway of Kuala Lumpur International Airport, steady lights glowed, service vehicles glided along the terminal, and a steady hum of jet engines hung over the concrete strip. Malaysian flight MH370, bound for Beijing, was preparing for departure. On board, 227 passengers and 12 crew members. People from 15 countries. Tourists, businessmen, families with children. Someone held a ticket to a new life, someone was simply returning home. No one suspected that in a few hours their names would become part of the most terrible mystery of modern aviation. The pilot, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a man with a kind face and tired eyes. 33 years in the sky. He was known as a meticulous and professional. He loved his job, said that he found peace in the sky. That night, as always, he sat in the pilot's seat calmly and confidently. Next to him, young co-pilot Farik Abdul Hamid, who was about to conduct one of his first international flights under the guidance of a mentor. At 0:42 the plane lifted off the ground. Wings, like two blades, cut through the darkness. Beneath them, the shimmer of the city, threads of highways, rare flashes of headlights. In the cockpit, everything was going according to plan. Course, northeast, to Beijing. Flight time, 6 hours. Behind the pilots, in the cabin, someone was already sleeping, someone was quietly talking, someone was listening to music. An ordinary night flight. Nothing unusual. So far. 38 minutes later, it was still calm. The plane reached cruising altitude. On the displays, flat lines. On the radio channel, routine phrases. At 1:19 a.m., Captain Zahari made contact with Malaysian air traffic controllers. Good night, Malaysia 370. These were the last words heard from the crew. A few seconds later, the plane was supposed to transfer control to Vietnamese air traffic controllers. But the connection was lost. On the radar, where the MH370 tag was still blinking, suddenly, silence. The transponder signal disappeared. Controllers tried to call the plane again. Once. Twice. 5. 10 minutes. There was no answer. At first, they thought it was a malfunction. Such things happen, instruments can glitch. But a few minutes later, nothing appeared on the screens of the Vietnamese control center either. MH370 disappeared. It was at this moment, between two radar pings, one of the greatest mysteries of the century began. Darkness reigned in the sky over the South China Sea. Somewhere there, at an altitude of 10 kilometers, the Boeing 777 suddenly changed course. It turned, almost at a right angle. First, back, over Malaysia. Then, along the border with Thailand, as if someone was guiding it along an invisible line, avoiding every radar. But no one knew this. Not that night. Not in the next few hours. While the radars were silent, Panic erupted in the Kuala Lumpur control room. Connection lost. Try via satellite. Switch frequency. Where was it last? Commands followed one after another. But on the monitors, emptiness. As if the plane dissolved into thin air. The next morning, the news spread around the world. Flight MH370 is missing. Dozens of countries began searching. Ships, planes, satellites, everything that could see at least a shadow on the water. Hundreds of relatives and friends gathered at Beijing Airport, looking at the display board with the inscription delayed, delayed. Someone was crying. Someone just stood there, like a stone. Passengers' phones were still ringing. And some even picked up the phone. A long beep was heard, as if someone was about to answer on the other end. But no one answered. A day later, it became clear, MH370 did not land anywhere on Earth. Not a single airport recorded its arrival. Not a single controller heard a distress signal. Not a single satellite detected an explosion flash in the air. The plane simply vanished into the shadows. Later, experts would find out, the onboard communication systems were manually disabled. This was not an accident. Someone in the cockpit knew what they were doing. Why? Who? And most importantly, why? On the fourth day of the search, the Prime Minister of Malaysia addressed reporters. Silence filled the hall. He stated, "The plane turned back. It flew over our territory and headed towards the Indian Ocean." These words changed everything. The search operation, focused from the very beginning in the South China Sea, was being conducted in the wrong place. For days, lost. For days, during which the ocean had time to erase the traces. Meanwhile, the families of the missing waited in uncertainty. In the airport lobby, there were signs with the names of loved ones, photographs, candles, flowers. Every day, new rumors. Every day, new hopes, which crumbled to dust. We believe they are alive. They could have landed somewhere. Maybe they were kidnapped. No one wanted to utter the word sea. Because the sea is an eternal grave. Night after night, day after day, search planes flew over the ocean. They saw only water. Cold, featureless, endless. Somewhere beneath this water, perhaps, lay the answer. But the ocean was silent. MH370 disappeared not just from radars. It disappeared from reality. The world froze in anticipation. On news screens, one word, etched into everyone's memory, MH370. The plane that vanished. Simply vanished from the sky, from time, from reality itself. The first days after the catastrophe became chaos. No one knew where to look, where to fly, where to search. Malaysia, Vietnam, China, Singapore, all sent their planes into the sky. Ships scoured the ocean. Hundreds of people went sleepless for days. But the more they searched, the less they found. As if the ocean itself hid its secret beneath a heavy mass of water. Nervous silence reigned at the search headquarters. Radars showed noise, satellites picked up fuzzy signals, pilots reported of suspicious spots on the sea surface. Every new report ignited a spark of hope. But it was invariably followed by disappointment. It's just debris. Coordinate error. It's not it. Not a single piece of wreckage. No fuel slick. No black box signal. Hundreds of ships, dozens of planes, and not a single trace. Meanwhile, on land, another tragedy was unfolding, a human one. In airport waiting halls sat the families of the missing. Days turned into nights, nights into days. Phones still rang, as if someone on the other end of the line could answer. "Mom, he couldn't just vanish," cried a girl in the hall. "They must be somewhere," repeated an elderly woman, clutching a photograph of her son. Everyone clung to hope. Because if the plane wasn't found, then it was somewhere. But with each passing day, hope died. Slowly. Silently. A week later, 26 countries were already involved in the search. It was one of the most extensive search operations in human history. But even with the latest radars, satellites, and underwater drones, there were no results. The captain of one of the ships said in an interview, "We're not looking for a plane. We're looking for a ghost." And it felt like the truth. First, the waters of the South China Sea were searched. Then, the Gulf of Thailand. Then, the Andaman Sea. And every day the search line moved further and further, until it reached the immense Indian Ocean. But there, the realm of chaos began. Storms, waves as high as a 10-story building, black clouds that swallowed the light. Even warships lost their bearings. And beneath them, an abyss where no ray of sun penetrates. And yet something was found. The company Inmarsat, a satellite communications operator, detected mysterious pings, short signals emanating from the plane after its disappearance. These echoes from the void repeated every half hour. The last signal was caught 7 hours after takeoff. 7 hours. This meant the plane had flown for a long time after it disappeared from radar. But where? Engineers began to calculate the trajectory. Their calculations pointed south, to where the lifeless Indian Ocean stretched. To where there were no islands, no ships, no salvation. The world stood still. If MH370 had indeed gone south, it meant only one thing: everyone on board was dead even before the plane crashed into the water. But who turned it there? And why was the transponder manually switched off? There were no answers. Only questions. Only darkness. A month passed. Then 2. The search area expanded to 120,000 square kilometers. A huge area, larger than all of Greece. People hoped the ocean would finally yield something. Even a piece of a wing, a shred of a seat, a fragment that would say, "Here it is, MH370. But the ocean was silent. Silent, as if guarding a secret. A year passed. The world had almost resigned itself. And suddenly, news. On the tiny island of Réunion, off the coast of Madagascar, a wing fragment was found. Part of a trailing edge flap, a flapron. Thousands of kilometers from the point of departure. But forensic analysis confirmed, it was indeed MH370. This discovery was like a thunderclap. The world spoke again. So, the plane really did crash into the ocean. But where was the rest? Researchers built a drift model. Winds, currents, seasons, everything pointed to the southern part of the Indian Ocean. Precisely where Inmarsat satellite calculations had previously indicated. Dozens of vessels set off there. Scanners scoured the seabed at depths of up to 6 kilometers. Underwater drones filmed everything their cameras saw. But where they expected to see wreckage, there lay only an endless void. No traces. As if the plane had dissolved in the water without a single sound. While experts searched for metal, others searched for answers. In the homes of relatives, candles still burned. On the walls, photographs, notes, children's drawings with the inscription, "Daddy, come home." People wrote letters to the government, organized rallies, demanded the truth. "They're hiding something," cried some. It was sabotage. Others claimed. Every day brought new rumors, new pain, new hopes. Investigators began to look for answers in the cockpit. After all, someone had switched off the transponder. Only a person familiar with the system could do that. On Captain Zahari's home computer, a flight simulator was found. And there, a route, strikingly similar to the one MH370 took. The same turn. The same trajectory. The same darkness in the south. Coincidence? Or a deliberate plan? Some said the captain was depressed. That he had family problems. That, perhaps, he decided to leave, forever, but not alone. Others claimed, impossible. Zahari was a professional. He wouldn't have done that. He was an instructor, a mentor, an example to others. But the facts spoke for themselves. Transponder manually switched off, course altered, communication severed. Every step, as if planned in advance. According to satellite data, the plane flew for about 6 more hours after the turn. All this time, in complete silence. Without communication, without light, without life. If the hypothesis is correct, then the passengers died in their sleep. There was no oxygen. First a slight dizziness, then, a soft darkness, silence, peace. And the plane continued to fly. Perhaps MH370's last hours passed over the boundless ocean under the stars. Where neither radio, nor wind, nor screams could be heard. Only the roar of engines and the breath of death. When the fuel ran out, the autopilot continued to hold its course. To the very last. Until the wings faltered, the engines fell silent, and the giant machine slid down, into the abyss. Some experts believe that the plane did not crash, but landed softly on the water, like a giant glider. That's why there's so little wreckage. It didn't explode, it sank. Slowly. Without a trace. In January 2017, the search officially ended. 3 years of effort, billions of dollars, thousands of hours of work. And only a few fragments found. The Malaysian government stated, the plane depressurized, people suffocated, the autopilot guided it to the end of its journey. But the world didn't believe it. Too many inconsistencies. Too many mysteries. Why was the transponder switched off? Why did the course change so precisely? Who was flying the plane in the last minutes? Answers, none. People looked at the sky and whispered, "Where are you?" But the sky was silent. As if it itself did not want to yield the truth. The entire planet awaited answers. But the longer the investigation dragged on, the more questions arose. MH370 became a symbol of a mystery that yields to neither logic, nor science, nor common sense. What happened that night? Who turned the plane back? Why did the signals disappear? Why did no one see a flash, a fire, a catastrophe? The world split into camps. Everyone chose their own truth. The official version simply stated, technical malfunction. Namely, there was a power system failure, communication loss, and the crew could not report the distress. But experts debunked this theory almost immediately. A Boeing 777, a reliable machine. Even with a complete loss of electronics, pilots were obliged to establish contact at least via an emergency channel. And the transponder and communication system turned off, one after another, not simultaneously. This was not an accident. This was human action. Another hypothesis, hijacking. Perhaps there was a terrorist or a group on board, attempting to change course and escape. But again, no. There were no threats on board, not a single suspicious passenger. Not a single ransom demand, not a single organization claiming responsibility. And then, where could one hijack a plane that was flying into emptiness? Into nowhere. Into an ocean where there is neither a base, nor land. Many said, MH370 was shot down. Accidentally. Or intentionally. After all, near the flight route there are many military zones, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and a little further, the U.S. base on Diego Garcia. Some claimed, the plane allegedly flew into a forbidden zone, and it was destroyed. But no one confessed. Not a single country. Not a single radar showed traces of a missile. And that means, another dead end. The internet was seething. Thousands of forums, millions of comments. People wrote about secret cargoes, about scientists transporting technologies, about experimental weapons. Someone claimed, there were specialists on board from a company working on military microchips. Others, that it was espionage, and the plane disappeared not by accident. But evidence, zero. Only conjectures. Only fear. Only mirages. Someone said, Captain Zahari could have, personally, directed the plane to its doom. This version became the most terrifying. His personal life was collapsing. His marriage was falling apart, he lived alone, friends said he became withdrawn and silent. He could have planned everything in advance. First disconnect communication, then turn the plane around, set a course and take it where no one would find it. But this version sounded too horrifying to be true. How could a man, who had dreamt of the sky his whole life, turn it against himself? And then the strangest thing began. Some started talking about outside interference. About UFOs. About the plane disappearing from radars, not just like that, as if someone erased it from space. It sounds insane, but then again, the disappearance of MH370 is insanity itself. One of the pilots involved in the search told a journalist, I have been flying for 30 years. But such a thing does not happen. A plane cannot simply disappear. Not a single theory capable of explaining everything ever emerged. Each had logical holes. Each broke against facts, against the silence of the ocean, against the stillness of the sky. MH370 became the new Mary Celeste, a ghost ship of the XXI century. Only now, in the sky. To understand the mystery, one needs to understand the human. Who was Zahari Ahmad Shah? Why is his name forever linked to this nightmare? He was born in 1961, dreamed of the sky since childhood. He became a pilot, an instructor, one of the best in the airline. In his home, a collection of model airplanes, diplomas, photos with students. He loved to fly. But behind his outward smile, tiredness was hidden. He was going through a difficult divorce, felt loneliness, withdrew into himself. He often spent hours on his home flight simulator, and there, they say, he flew alone, in silence, along routes no one knew. On the day of departure, neighbors saw him leave his house, calmly, confidently, with his pilot's bag. No signs of anxiety. He smiled at the guard, said, "Good night." And a few hours later his voice was heard on the air, "Good night, Malaysia 370." And that was it. Investigators said, his actions that night were precise, conscious, cold-blooded. He disconnected communication, turned the plane, circumvented radar boundaries. Every turn, calculated. Every minute, under control. If this was an accident, then why did everything look like a plan? Journalists found recordings of his streams, old posts, comments. He loved to quote phrases about freedom, about flight, about how there is no lie in the sky. He was a man seeking peace, and, perhaps, did not find it on earth. He once wrote, "When you are alone in the sky, no one can stop you." Was this a metaphor? Or a premonition? Not a single examination gave a precise answer. No proof of suicide. No letter, no note, no confession. But refutation, there is none either. Maybe he just wanted to disappear along with everyone. Maybe he wanted to go into the sky forever. And what about the second pilot, Farrokh Hamid? He was young, married, was going to become a captain. No motives, no problems. If Sahari decided to act alone, Farrokh could have intervened. But, perhaps, everything happened suddenly. Oxygen is disconnected, pressure drops, people lose consciousness. The pilot remains alone, and flies into eternity. Every detail of this story forms a terrible symphony. First, takeoff. Then, system shutdown. A turn. And a long, silent flight into darkness. No scream, no distress signal, no attempt to escape. Only the steady hum of engines, until the fuel ran out. As if the plane itself became an extension of the pilot's soul. A machine, rushing into the abyss. Years have passed. But the mystery of MH370 still lives on. It gives no peace to investigators, journalists, relatives, and indeed the whole world. The ocean never revealed its secret. At the bottom of the Indian Ocean, perhaps, lies the aircraft's fuselage, its black boxes, the truth, but they are still there, in silence. Sometimes sailors, passing by those coordinates, say they feel a strange pressure, as if the water itself is looking at them. No one knows exactly where MH370 lies, but everyone feels that it is there. And every time news of a new catastrophe echoes in the world, someone inevitably remembers that March flight. That plane, which disappeared, leaving neither a trace, nor a scream, nor a light. Why did this happen? Who was at the controls in the final minutes? And can answers ever be found? Perhaps one day the ocean will decide to return what it took. Perhaps underwater drones will find the black box, and we will finally hear the last seconds. Or maybe, no. Perhaps this mystery will forever remain between sky and water. MH370 became not just a tragedy. It became a symbol of human helplessness before the universe. We are accustomed to thinking that we control the world, that technology gives us power over fate. But should a machine take off into the sky, and everything changes? There, where radars end, where radio cannot be heard and shores are not visible, another reality begins, cold, endless, indifferent. The sea is just as calm. But every time a plane flies over the Indian Ocean, someone inevitably looks down. There, where, perhaps, at the bottom, under the thick water, metal sleeps, and in its cold wreckage, the echo of that last signal is still preserved, "Good night, Malaysia 370." And the sky answers with silence.